I'm on a roll. There might not be any bloopers today. Wouldn't that be great? We are back. Season 2 of the Telepathy Tapes is upon us. So, you know what that means, or maybe you don't, in which case, hi, hello, my name is Sundown, and this is Logically Free-Spirited, a channel where I talk about all things relating to science and spirituality, while always trying to remain open-minded yet grounded. And these topics include my personal deep dives into the Telepathy Tapes, a groundbreaking podcast that I just can't get enough of. And this is the start of Season 2. So if you are not caught up yet, I highly encourage you to go back and listen to Season 1 of the Telepathy Tapes, or my deep dives going into each episode before continuing on with this video. I will link everything below and on the screen where I can. All right, now that that is out of the way and we are all friends here, hi, it's good to see you. Welcome back. I cannot believe we are here. As a reminder, my goal with each video is to recap the episode while expanding on the concepts, theories, people introduced, and even my own questions as they arise throughout the podcast. And as always, I want to give credit to Kai and her team for creating that initial content that has sent me into unrecoverable ontological shock. Thank you, Kai. What you and all of the people you are working with are doing is literally changing the world. But okay, let's get started. I am sure that you remember that in Season 1, we were introduced to a whole cast of characters, including our host, documentarian Kai Dickinson, and multiple doctors, including Dr. Diane Hennessy, formerly Hennessy Powell, and 10 different children or young adults and their families that taught all of us that telepathy is real and that consciousness may actually be the foundation of our reality rather than a byproduct of our biology. And this second season is set to be all about consciousness, and I could not be more excited. It is one of my absolute favorite topics to research, discuss, and rabbit hole into. So this is going to be a lot of fun. The first episode jumps right in by exploring the idea that consciousness may exist beyond death, and their evidence is provided by anecdotal stories as well as verifiable NDE or near-death experience cases. We will be revisiting some of the telepaths from Season 1 as soon as the next episode, but for this first one, we start by meeting a man called Dr. Gregory Shushan. Dr. Shushan is one of the world's leading authorities on NDEs, particularly in ancient civilizations. From what I could find, he actually holds numerous degrees, including a PhD in religious studies from the University of Wales, and degrees in research methods for the humanities, Egyptian archaeology, and Eastern Mediterranean archaeology, all from University College London. As of 2024, he was also working towards his second PhD with a project on near-death experiences in classical antiquity, which simply refers to the period of ancient Greek and Roman civilizations. He has also authored several books on these topics, all of which can be found on his website, which is in the description box. So, all of that to be said, it is very clear that this man is accredited and knows what he's talking about. Dr. Shushan has studied ancient texts from Egypt, Sumer, India, Africa, and Mesoamerica, comparing afterlife beliefs across all of these cultures. One story he tells is about a man called Kien-tszi? I think that's it, from Zhao in ancient China. And on his deathbed, he visited another realm and met who he referred to as the Emperor of Heaven, who was accompanied by a young boy. Ultimately, Kien-tszi was sent back to his body, and years later, while walking through a providence different from the one in which he lived, he came across a younger man who he said looked vaguely familiar. This man was staring at him, making direct eye contact, and proceeded to kind of walk towards him, essentially forcing an interaction. So Kien-tszi asked him if they knew each other and why he was stopping him. And essentially the young man looked at him and said, I know that on whatever the date was, you had a near-death experience, and on the other side, you met the Emperor of Heaven, because I was the little boy that was with him. Apparently, both men had NDEs at the same time on the same day, and they saw each other on the other side Then both returned to the land of the living and crossed paths years later. It's a remarkable story, and apparently it was taken seriously in China. According to Dr. Shushan, there were people that were actually sent out to interview those involved, and it was apparently recorded as an official government document. Though personally, I wasn't able to find the original text or any government documentation, though it's important to remember that this was thousands of years ago, and many early Chinese accounts still haven't been translated. Anyway, Dr. Shushan says that China as a whole is, or at least was, very focused and interested in near-death experiences. And he references a series of books by the 19th century Dutch scholar de Groot called The Religious Systems of China that expand more on this. Beyond cases like Kien-tsi's, there were also other compelling ways in which NDEs were verified across cultures. Another form involved experiencers encountering people on the other side who they believed at the time to be living. Without modern communication methods, it could take weeks or months for news of someone's passing to reach another area. But these people would have their experience, go on the other side, see someone they thought was alive, return to Earth, tell everybody who they saw, and then verify that that person that they saw had in fact passed away, and the news just hadn't made it to them yet. It's very compelling. Also, in his research, Dr. Shushan came across a pattern, 9 elements that he claims appear across all cultures when experiencing an NDE, though he says it's important to add that not everyone will experience every element, but they are as follows. 1. Leaving the body, or an out-of-body experience. 2. Encountering or actually seeing one's own body. 3. Traveling through darkness or a tunnel. 4. Meeting deceased relatives or ancestors. 5. Encountering a presence or being of light. This is often described as a ultimate divine presence. 6, conduct evaluation or life review. 7, barriers or obstacles, basically encountering thresholds like bridges, gates, or guardians that often act as transition points or gatekeepers who help determine whether you can proceed further or must return to earthly life. 8, oneness or enlightenment. And 9, ultimately arriving into a realm of light or the final destination. Through Dr. Shushan's work, it is clear that many religious beliefs about the afterlife stem from ancient accounts of NDEs. When experiencers returned and shared what they had seen, those accounts seeped into religious texts and shaped our beliefs about the afterlife. Though counter to that, I suppose one could say it's a chicken and egg situation. Who's to say the churches weren't already saying what they were saying before these accounts started rolling in? Perhaps that's how these accounts were influenced. Anyway, what I am actually grappling with is the idea that it is not the exact same experience for everyone. Yes, I understand not everyone experiences all 9 of those elements, but in the accounts we are about to hear, it's evident that the people who do experience the same elements don't necessarily experience them in the same way. Take the white light. Some see a brilliant white light, but some say they see Jesus or Buddha or insert your chosen deity here, and that's not what I expected. In my head, I always assumed, or perhaps I hoped, that when the time comes and we go to the other side, it would all make sense and we would all be there together in that understanding of whatever the ultimate truth is. But this white light is apparently open to interpretation. According to Dr. Shushan, our cultural experience on Earth colors our experience elsewhere, so we can make sense of it. He said it's almost like, quote, the experience is only experienceable by our capacity to project our cultural norms and symbols onto it. And he added that he finds it likely that the experiencers are interacting with the same being of light, just interpreting it differently versus actually seeing different entities or deities. But honestly, I don't know how that sits with me. Throughout the episode, we will hear accounts of ultra-consciousness, feelings of reality being more real than we can comprehend in 3D, music and colors that don't exist in the spectrum that we currently experience. inner knowings and understandings. Yet these people also report interactions that vary from one another because for some reason a cultural filter has to be applied so it will make sense to us. I would like to think that if in this scenario and we experience ultra consciousness, why wouldn't that include the ability to comprehend the ultimate truth without needing to apply a cultural filter? Does that mean that everything, even the afterlife, is open to interpretation? That there is no ultimate truth, no real answer? Or what if the cultural lens only gets applied when the experiencer returns and tries to explain what happened? Maybe in effort to put it into words, that's when things start getting coded with the cultural biases and comparisons that we carry when trying to articulate an ineffable experience. Keep all of this in mind as we continue on, because the next person we meet is a direct experiencer who found himself on the other side without any cultural baggage. Someone who says that while in this other place, he had no memory of life on Earth, no memory of his personal beliefs about religion or the afterlife, and no memory of over 25 years of education and experience studying the brain as a neurosurgeon. Next is Dr. Eben Alexander. Dr. Alexander went to the University of North Carolina for undergrad and received his MD from the Duke University School of Medicine. He went on to teach at Harvard Medical School until 2001 and held appointments at several prestigious hospitals, including Brigham and Women's Hospital, Massachusetts General Hospital, Boston's Children's Hospital, and University of Virginia School of Medicine. Prior to his experience, he considered himself a staunch materialist and assumed that any reports of NDEs were simply hallucinations or byproducts of brain malfunction. That is until the age of 55 when he contracted meningitis and was put into a medically induced coma. That was done because the infection had caused so much swelling that his neocortex completely shut down. Now, the neocortex is located on the outermost layer of the brain. It's essentially the largest part and wraps around the limbic and the reptilian brain. And I actually want to pause here for just a second because until I was researching this, I forgot that something called the reptilian brain even existed. Basically, in its most basic form, the brain can be divided into 3 sections. At the base, we have the reptilian brain, which is composed of the brainstem and the cerebellum, where instincts and survival mode live. Surrounding that is the limbic brain, considered the emotional or feeling brain. And then the outermost and largest part is the neocortex. It's composed of 4 main lobes: the frontal, parietal, temporal, and occipital lobes, and is considered the thinking brain, responsible for sensory perception, cognition, and reasoning. So when Dr. Alexander's neocortex was completely shut down by conventional science, he should not have been able to have been capable of having any type of experience at all. But girl, did he. During his coma, Dr. Alexander experienced 3 distinct realms. The first he called the earthworm's eye view. He describes it as this dark, murky, primitive realm, the most basic level of consciousness. Then there was the second realm, which he was brought to via a melodic light that acted as a type of portal. He described this realm as a paradise where he experienced ultra reality. He had no body awareness, and he explained that the sensory experience of that world far exceeds our physical senses here. According to Dr. Alexander, this middle realm is where people reunite with what he called soul groups, or loved ones who have passed. And that's actually something that I've heard before. Not in the context of NDEs, but the concept of soul groups in general. It's the idea that essentially many of our loved ones that are with us are souls that we continue to reincarnate alongside in different ways. That your brother in this life may have been your mother in the last one and maybe your best friend in the next. Though honestly, I'm starting to believe that this, then, and next may not be applicable, as these incarnations could apparently be happening concurrently. And it's honestly very hard to wrap my brain around. Anyway, This realm is also where next incarnations are planned and when the life review happens. And this life review comes in the form of feelings and from the perspective of those around you. So essentially a third-person view, which I just want to note, Dr. Alexander said that he had no memory of his earthly life when he was in this realm. So I wonder what the life review was like. Did it feel like he was watching an actor on a screen, someone who felt separate from himself? Or at some point, did he start to remember who he was and then it made sense? I mean, I imagine there's a lot of nuance involved when describing this type of experience. Anyway, the third realm is what he considered the core realm and was also accessed via musical portal. He said there he witnessed four-dimensional space-time collapsing, time just flowing differently, and all the paradoxes of being human resolved into pure oneness. Male, female, good, bad, dark, light, everything became one. And that's where he acknowledged his oneness with what he described as an infinitely powerful and loving God force. Over time, while still in the coma, he would tumble between these three realms, sometimes returning to the earthworm's eye view and then remembering the music, tones that he says goes beyond any earthly music, and it would propel him back to the next realm and then the next and the next. Throughout all of this, he also had a spirit guide, a beautiful young woman who communicated telepathically. He didn't recognize her at first. It wasn't until 4 months post-coma that he realized the spirit guide was his late sister that he had never met. This was later confirmed when he saw a photo of her and realized that's who it was. After recovery, remembering who he is and checking out his own medical records, CT scans, MRI scans, and talking with his doctors, Dr. Alexander could not find a medical explanation for his experience. The amount of brain damage he had shouldn't have allowed for even a dream or hallucination, much less the experience that he describes as being more real than reality. He ultimately concluded that consciousness genuinely left his body and that the only explanation is non-local consciousness. Consciousness that doesn't come from the brain, but is essentially piped in from somewhere else. Transitioning Dr. Alexander from a dismissive materialist to someone who fully believes that consciousness exists beyond the brain. And we are going to return to this concept repeatedly. Okay, so before we meet our next experiencer, we must also meet another expert, Dr. Jeffrey Long. He is a radiation oncologist who founded the Near-Death Experience Research Foundation, or NDERF. It's an organization that collects firsthand accounts of NDEs, currently over 5,200, and conducts research with them, as well as provides research for those interested in learning more. The site's webmaster, Jody Long, is a retired attorney, and I believe she is Dr. Long's wife, but she is also the webmaster for two other websites, ADCRF, or After Death Communication Research Foundation, and OBERF, or Other Consciousness Experience Research Foundation, which covers everything that is not an NDE or about after-death communication. Things like out-of-body experiences, spiritually transformative events, meditation experiences, etc. Anyway, Dr. Long's research counters the materialist belief that NDEs are chemical reactions of the brain malfunctioning. As in, yes, Dr. Alexander's brain was malfunctioning when he had his NDE, but Dr. Long has collected thousands of experiences from people whose brains were properly functioning during their experience. People like Martha Beck, who had her experience while under general anesthesia. Martha is a best-selling author with 3 degrees from Harvard. She has her BA in East Asian Studies and her master's and her PhD in sociology. And interestingly, I found that she has quite a large online footprint, yet does not mention this story as far as I can tell. But apparently she left academia after this experience. In her case, during surgery, she suddenly became sharply aware and could see everything happening around her in the room. That included watching the surgeons operate on her. At one point, she says she sat up out of her body, got confused, and then laid back down and started staring up at the surgical lamps. That's when a brilliant golf ball-sized light appeared in the center of the lamps, and it started expanding in all directions, eventually touching her body. The moment it touched her, a sensation of absolute love, warmth, and home flooded through her. She said the light was conscious and that it was laughing. So then she started laughing, and then she actually started crying out of pure joy. She said that describing the experience is like trying to draw the galaxy with a box of crayons, and I love that. Anyway, at some point the light told her, I want you to remember that you don't wait until you die to feel this way. Your task in life is to feel the way you feel right now without being able to see it. When she woke up, she was still crying with joy, and she asked to see the anesthesiologist. When he came in, he was terrified. The medical team had apparently seen tears, physical tears, running down Martha's face during surgery, and they were afraid that she could actually feel the procedure and requested that he give her more anesthetic, but he had refused. He said that for the first time in his career of over 30 years, a voice inside his head said very clearly, don't. She's crying because she's happy. So he didn't, but he was worried he had made a mistake. And I cannot imagine. I'm sure he must have felt so much better after she explained her experience. Anyway, here we have independent verification from medical professionals. Doctors that actually saw her tears of joy and an anesthesiologist that heard a voice in his head. It seems impossible to believe that they were all hallucinating or making things up. We also hear a story directly from a professional, a clinical social worker named Kimberly Clark Sharp, who verifies the story of another experiencer, Maria. Maria was a patient at Harborview Medical Center in Seattle who went into cardiac arrest. While being resuscitated, she described floating out of her body, eventually out of the room, and ultimately seeing a single dark blue worn tennis shoe sitting on a ledge outside the hospital somewhere. After she was revived, Maria excitedly told Kimberly exactly what she saw via translator. She said that she was first up in the corner of her hospital room looking down, and then suddenly she found herself above the emergency room exit, 3 or 4 stories above the ground. That's where she saw the shoe. Kimberly was skeptical, but she went looking. She started near the room that they were in, but eventually she went to a completely different wing of the hospital, somewhere Maria never even walked through. And she looked down from one of the higher floors, and then she spotted it. Exactly what Maria described seeing, exactly where she described seeing it. This obviously rocked Kimberly's understanding of reality. I mean, it would likely give anyone ontological shock. These stories, the one about Martha and her tears and Maria and the shoe, both contain what's called veridical perception. In the podcast, it's introduced by Dr. Long, and it refers to observations made during NDEs that are then later verified independently. But veridical perception doesn't just include seeing physical locations or hearing conversations. It can also mean gaining senses or abilities that a person doesn't have in earthly life. One of the most striking examples Dr. Long shares is a story about Vicki. Vicki was legally blind from birth and involved in a severe car accident in her early 20s. I believe she was 22. During her NDE, for the first time in her life, she experienced vision. Her consciousness rose above her body in the emergency room, and she said that she could see herself. At first, understandably, she was horrified because sight was completely unknown to her. But eventually, she started to recognize herself, initially by her long hair and then a ring on her hand, both things she previously only knew by touch. In addition to suddenly having sight, she described experiencing 360-degree vision during her NDE, not just seeing what was in front of her, but being aware of everything around her, front, back, left, right, up, down. Dr. Long calls it spherical vision, and Becky actually thinks it's comical that those of us with earthly sight have such a limited pie-shaped visual field. I have actually linked a video in the description box that you can hear Vicki's account directly in her own words. Stories like her make you wonder that if consciousness can grant sight to someone who has never seen, what else might it be capable of? In Vicki's case, she observed things happening in this same room as her body, but these perceptions can also occur miles away, like with Randy Schaeffer, who not only witnessed events far from his body, but also returned with a message to deliver. I'm using a new teleprompter, and it's working. Like I'm getting through this a little easier. May mean less bloopers, but Randy is a veteran who spent 20 years as a special agent in the Office of Special Investigations. His expertise was in forensic science, and he was in charge of crime scene investigations. A religious skeptic, his entire world revolved around physical evidence and tangible proof. In March 2020, at the very beginning of everything, Randy contracted COVID, and doctors gave him about a 3% chance of survival, so he was put into a medically induced coma. During this time, Randy's family couldn't visit him, but he says that his consciousness actually traveled miles away to visit them in their homes. He later verified what he witnessed during that time, but that was just the beginning. As Randy's health declined, his consciousness began to travel further, and he said that he found himself at one point in a giant, beautiful room that sounded like it was straight out of a mythological castle. At some point, someone came up to him, though, and said, communicating only telepathically, that it wasn't his time and he had to go. So Randy went through these giant oak doors at the end of the room, and he found himself in a beautiful pedestrian city with parks on both sides. He describes the beauty as beyond comparison, but suddenly he realized he was lost and he didn't know where he was, and he started to panic and yell for help. But he said that none of the people that he could kind of sense around him were acknowledging him. He said that in the distance he saw a grand staircase going up as far as he could see, and he had got the thought in his head that if he could just get to the stairs and maybe up them, someone would see him and recognize him and help him out. So sure enough, once he got up the stairs, someone called out his name and essentially whisked him away, and he says everything went dark again into a area that sounds similar to Dr. Alexander's earthworm's eye view. Anyway, that is the dark and murky first realm. Also, like Dr. Alexander's experience, Randy would go from the dark consciousness of his body back to this other place more than once. Each time he said that the same elements were present, the staircase, the city, the park, but sometimes new discoveries were made, like vibrant flowers and trees that aren't known to exist on Earth with colors he'd never previously experienced. He said it felt safe, calm, and peaceful, and usually someone would come and find him and tell him it wasn't his time and he had to go, and he would find himself back in that dark space once more. Then there was the final time where he ended up somewhere completely different. He reported a void at the end of a tunnel where orbs of light were zooming past him. Suddenly, an orb in the distance caught his attention and came flying towards him. He said a face materialized for the quickest second and told him telepathically, "Tell Madison at the salon her grandfather is okay." And then the word veteran just started reverberating throughout his head over and over. The being went on to show him a white porch and American flags made out of ribbons. Then suddenly his spirit guide said they had to leave, and Randy was gone back to his dark, sedated world. That was the last time that his consciousness traveled in this way. When Randy came out of his coma, he told his daughter about his experience, including the message that he was supposed to deliver to someone called Madison, though he had no idea who she was. At some point, Randy was drawn to one of his home's junk drawers, and in it he found an old beat-up business card to a hair salon. He gave the card to his daughter, and he asked her to make him an appointment. When she picked up the card, she started freaking out, asking Randy where he got the card, how long he had the card, essentially asking if he was messing with her, because on the back of the card, which Randy did not see, was written the name Madison. So, naturally, that's who they made the appointment with. When the time came, Randy was understandably nervous, but after building a bit of a rapport with Madison, he asked if he could ask her a few personal questions. She obliged, and ultimately, through their conversation and through the visions of the porch and the American flag, Randy was able to verify that the orb of light he communicated with was in fact Madison's late grandfather, John. Randy went on to talk to John's wife, Kathy. Once sent a photo, he confirmed that that was the face that materialized and, that was John, but not at the time of his death, not as an older man, as a younger, healthier, prime of his life version of John, which is very interesting. We have heard this before. In season 1 of the Telepathy Tapes, many of the telepaths who reported communicating with spirits said that they saw representation of those spirits when they were happy and healthy. Anyway, John was determined to communicate with his family because not only did he reach out to Madison by way of Randy, he also reached out to Kathy a few days after his passing by way of a complete stranger connected via wrong telephone number. A few days after John passed, Kathy, who lives in Iowa, was calling an insurance company and dialed the wrong phone number. A man in California answered, and after realizing the mix-up, the man started asking Kathy a few questions. Where was her area code from? Who was she calling? Why was she contacting insurance? Had someone in her home recently passed? She said yes, her partner had just passed away. And that is when the man said that he had recently gotten out of the hospital after a near-death experience, and the only thing that he could remember was meeting a gentleman who was from Iowa and in the military. And he wanted Kathy to know that if this gentleman was her relative and loved one, that he was fine. He was okay. Kathy says that to this very day, she cannot find the number that she called. It apparently just vanished from her phone. So John was persistent, and that is very cool. And now Randy's life has completely changed. He has made it his personal mission to help those who are grieving by sharing his experience and his stories in an effort to bring them some semblance of peace in terms of the afterlife. Okay, so we have heard a bit of NDE history from experiencers directly, as well as from the people who witnessed these things unfold. But what does the science have to say about all of this? Here is where I would like to insert a weird frontier that was not included in the podcast, at least not in the first episode. It intersects both neuroscience and quantum theory. Starting at the beginning, back in 1989, Roger Penrose, a mathematical physicist, philosopher of science, and Nobel laureate, posed that consciousness might arise from fundamental aspects of physics that are non-local and not entirely generated by the brain. Essentially, he suggested that consciousness could, in some sense, be transmitted or beamed into the brain from elsewhere. From that idea came a question. Anesthetics shut off consciousness, so could identifying what part of the cell anesthetics affect point to the antenna that receives consciousness? Around 1996, Stuart Hameroff, an anesthesiologist and professor at the University of Arizona, teamed up with Penrose. They proposed that tiny microscopic structures called microtubules could be the binding site for anesthesia, forming the basis for their orchestrated objective reduction theory. And initially, in a pattern that feels all too familiar, they were ridiculed and mocked. Microtubules are cytoskeletal elements with constantly shifting polarities that provide a structure for motor proteins to move along throughout the body. They are present in every eukaryotic cell of humans, plants, and animals, but are particularly complex when it comes to neurons. They are also one of the most evolutionary conserved aspects of living organisms. So they are old and they are vital. Research has found that general anesthetic gases can bind to microtubules and disrupt their ability to transmit or process quantum level information that might contribute to awareness and decision making. So in other words, consciousness. And another study in rats showed that drugs that stabilize microtubules significantly delayed the onset of unconsciousness under anesthesia, essentially inferring that if you mess with the microtubules, anesthesia doesn't work as well. This suggests that microtubules may indeed be part of the physical substrate of awareness, acting as part of the receiver or antenna for non-local consciousness. It's fascinating and still very controversial, and I have linked resources below, including a fantastic YouTube video that introduced me to this concept and was sent to me by one of you. Thank you, Andy. But back to the podcast's scientific approach. Here enters
Dr. Charlotte Marcial.
She has her PhD in biomedical sciences and pharmaceutics and her Master of Science in cognitive and behavioral neurosciences and psychological sciences, I believe, as well as her BS in psychological sciences, all from the University of Liège in Belgium. She started getting heavily into this research around 10 years ago, and now she leads or heads up all NDE studies at the Coma Science Group, which is an international multidisciplinary research team based in Belgium dedicated to improving our understanding of consciousness when it's acting out of the ordinary. In her research, she compared the phenomenology and potential neurophysiological mechanisms that underlie both NDEs and psychedelic experiences. These comparisons were done not only between people who had one experience or the other, but also people who have experienced both phenomena. They did find an overlap in mystical feelings, but there was one crucial difference. NDEs involve out-of-body experiences with accurate veridical perception of external reality, whereas psychedelics produce internal visions that don't allow for people to accurately describe what events were happening around them in reality. So that's the psychedelic comparison, but what else is there? What do the materialists say? Well, typically they go to the dying brain hypothesis. It's the standard explanation that says things like oxygen deprivation may cause visions of the tunnel, and things like abnormal bursts of brain activity may cause the life review, etc. Essentially, special effects of the dying brain. But cases like Martha Beck's shatter that notion when they have this experience while under anesthesia with a fully functioning non-dying brain. Her brain was not dying, so how could that be the cause of her NDE? The materialist model predicts diminishing fragmented consciousness. Experiencers report the opposite, though. This ultra enhanced, crystal clear awareness that makes ordinary life feel like a dream. And that is far from the only argument against brain-based explanations. As Kai says on the podcast, one of the most phenomenal pieces of evidence that supports what we've heard is that these experiencers come back with a profound change that they embody fully upon their return. Psychology shows that it can be extremely difficult to truly change behaviors and beliefs. However, after NDEs, people often return transformed. They are more compassionate, less competitive, less afraid of death, and oftentimes their spiritual beliefs change. They report experiencing a greater love for others and a oneness or connection with all living beings, as well as a knowledge of continuation of life after death. And universally, most do not want to return to their bodies here on Earth. They mostly report feeling more at home in these other realms. And separate but still interesting, some research has displayed these kinds of shifts in people after psychedelic journeys, or even major physical change like organ transplants. One recent survey found that nearly 90% of organ recipients reported personality or preference changes post-surgery. I just found that curious. Anyway, the common thread throughout the NDE stories suggests that consciousness can exist independently of the body and can survive death, that telepathy is the primary mode of communication, and that time is perceived differently or not at all, that there is some sort of being of light, and that we are reunited with loved ones, even pets, who are all in perfect health. And Finally, that everything exists in overwhelming love and all share a constant message that there is an afterlife that is more real than this life and that we should not fear death. This implies that if consciousness survives death and can somehow communicate across that divide, then the claims of the non-speakers that we met in season 1 and the mediums that we will meet in episode 2 of season 2 shift the impossible from plausible. And next we will discuss exactly that. We will reunite with Amelia from season 1, who has been overwhelmed by a flood of messages from spirits who have passed, and we will also explore the medium's side of all of this, a very controversial, highly fraudulent frontier. Also, I want to do a quick honorable mention to Dr. Jan Holden. She is a professor emeritus at the University of North Texas and was featured in the first episode of the Telepathy Tapes season 2, but I really didn't find a neater way to insert her into this recap, as her contributions were also stated by others throughout the podcast. But she was there, and I don't want to leave anyone out. All right, everyone. That is it for this first deep dive into season 2 of the Telepathy Tapes. Thank you so much for being here and for your patience. And if you stayed till the end and you enjoyed this video, or you learned something, or you just want to give me a nod of encouragement, please like this video and sub to the channel. It really helps the algorithm, and I don't want you to miss the next episode. Also, let me know in the comments if you or someone you are close to has ever experienced an NDE and what that experience was like. But that's it for now. Okay, see you soon. Bye. Visit. What? But it's okay. Or nope. Dr. Oh my God, I'm recording. I didn't think I was.